Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis, and I'm so excited for today. We have a guest I've been trying to get on here for a while, and we've been trying to make our schedules work. And I'm really happy to be able to get this person on today. Starts a new journey into the coaching world as a head coach of Newton South boys baseball, but just an absolute journeyman as far as coaches go. And this is a really cool story that we're going to be able to kind of talk about today and hit upon what I think is really great advice for coaches. Is currently in Newton South, but has coached at places like Mystic Valley, Pope John's, Salem Academy, St. Clemens, Everett, Bishop Fenwick, St. Joe's Prep, Minuteman, coached some Babe Ruth, won some championships. I hope I didn't leave anybody out there, but someone who I think has a really good coaching mind and someone who's a pretty intelligent coach and coaches a lot of different sports. So sees kids from a lot of different angles and a lot of different ways. And so I'm really excited to have on here today, ladies and gentlemen, from Newton South Baseball, Paul Williams.
Hey, Anthony, glad to be on. Trying to get schedules squared away for a while and been busy the past couple weeks after tryouts and just, our first 3 games the past week. But glad to be on and looking forward to having a great conversation about it.
Yeah, it's funny, man, because we were trying to get you on here earlier, like even like going back to like December, we were trying to work and get you on. And it's hard, it's really hard because so many people you talk to. And then I look at my schedule and sometimes you realize like you're more further booked than you really are, and you tell somebody like December and you're like, actually, man, I'm booked till like February right now, so I'm glad, we're really happy to get you on here. And I've known you a long time too. So it is nice to finally get you on here. We'll start right out the gate here at Newton South. I mean, you got the head coaching job. You're a teacher in Medford, so traveling to Newton South. I went to LaSalle College, which was right in Newton itself. So I know the commute there is not easy on a daily basis. So for me, just kind of for our guests out there, we have a lot of young coaches. Walk us through the interview process. I mean, you just freshly got the job. So obviously you were interviewed. It might've been, a couple different interview processes as far as how many times you had to go in there, but how do you walk in there with all the coaching experience that you have to let them know that you're the guy for the job and this is what the future looks like for the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, or however you present it in front of them?
Yeah, so the first interview I had was over Zoom, and I had put in for the job. I think it was late October. I had seen it posted, and but 3, 4 days later, put my name in, and I hadn't heard anything for a couple weeks, and then I got an email back. So I did the Zoom interview, and Miss Gonzalez was great. She said this is going to be a few weeks. We get a lot of people that we want to interview, and then we'll take it from there. So that was probably early to mid-November, and I hadn't heard anything, 3 weeks or so, and then I got an email and it just said we'd like to have you in for a second interview, and I didn't know, how far along the process were they. Are they going to bring in, 4 people, 5 people, 10 people for a second interview, cut it down to a couple, and then go from there? I mean, I really didn't know from there. And then I walked into that second interview in person, met a couple other people, the lacrosse coach, who's the equipment manager, the assistant athletic director. And then I realized how far along the process it was already. I was one of 4 finalists. And, the couple captains come in the interview room and, they start asking questions. There's, like I said, 4 or 5 of us in that room. And you just realize, okay, this seems like a really good fit. They're looking for someone that, has a background in multiple sports, works at a school. And the good thing for me was the ride actually works out okay because they don't get out until 3:45. So
Oh, wow.
we get out, as you know, at 2:18.
What time do
So
they start school?
9 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Okay. That makes a little bit more sense then. Kind
Yeah.
of smart,
So
actually.
Yeah, so in terms of me getting to the school, there's never a concern. I get there before they're even done with the day. So, like I said, on an average day, it's probably about 30 to 35 minutes from Medford High to Newton South. So, definitely manageable. Salem Academy was actually more of a ride than that. And yeah, like I said, the commute, no problem to me at all. I live in Revere, so it takes me about 25 to get home from Newton South, which isn't bad either.
Yeah. And, and probably the traffic pattern works out perfectly in a sense for you then too. It must be lesser traffic, especially in the commute home than it would
Oh
be if
yeah.
it was like normal time. Either way, actually going there or coming back. So interview process, I mean, when you go into that, what do you present? Like, what is it that you presented to them that, as far as I can take this job and this is my vision for the program? I mean, just for those young coaches out there, like, what's something that you really hung your hat on as far as what's important for a baseball program?
Yeah, so the big thing that I sold, and this was something they wanted to hear, was that players should be encouraged to play, two, three sports. Me being someone that has coached three sports for a while. I haven't coached basketball for a couple years, but at some point I'll hop back into that. But that was one of the big things. And then, being a teacher, a special ed teacher at the high school level, having played baseball, by no means was I a star. I didn't play in college, nothing along those lines. So just kind of saying like this is what I want to do. Like a lot of people become teachers and start coaching. I kind of was the opposite. I became a teacher because I wanted to coach. I was coaching when I was 18 years old, Medford Babe Ruth baseball. From there, the following year, my cousin's friend was the coach at Everett High School. I took that freshman job for a year, and from there, just situations often change. Like I did that for a year. I was hoping to go back for a second, but they kind of did away with the freshman spot, so they really didn't have anything. So then I went to St. Clements, and I love St. Clements. What a fun opportunity that was. Met some really good people. Nice small school, but once that closes, now it's time to figure something else out. And I had been at Bishop Fenwick for basketball, but the coach steps down. He wanted to go back to coaching at the college level. So
Yeah.
that was, like I said, another one where you just kind of the time has run its course. Now time to look for something else. So after St. Clements, everyone kind of transitioned over to Pope John, and then from
And then
there,
that, yeah, and then
yeah,
that
I mean
happened.
that I actually got out a little before they closed. I was over at St. Joe's prep for a baseball season, and then obviously Danny got the Mystic Valley job, and went over there for that. Ended up coaching girls basketball for a couple of years. Um, Baseball, I got that job the first year. Was really looking forward to that second year. We had a young team that first year. Then COVID hits, so that season gets canceled. And
So you
then
you yeah, you for all intents and purposes have just kind of been everywhere. And I think that that's like what stood out to me the most in your resume was the fact that coaching a lot of different sports for a lot of different people. I mean, I've always kind of coached with one head coach. So in a way, a lot of the game that I understand is through his eyes and through his mind. And for you to see a lot of different coaches and just small things now that you're running your own program. I mean, you get to coach with coaches at all different sports. As you mentioned, at Fenwick, a coach that wanted to go back and coach collegiately, which means before that they were coaching collegiately. So you got to work with a mind like that. So I think that that's what's so great about your resume. And when you got the Newton South job, as soon as I heard that, and I mean, I might have heard it like a week or so, maybe it after it happened, but I immediately reached out to you because I know how hard you work, and I know that it's not easy to work at a lot of different places and commute, and it takes up a lot of your time. And your life's mapped around that. Like your map of life is sports. Like everything else is based off of, okay, this is when I'm free after sports. Like, so I know that lifestyle, and it's not easy sometimes. So it's really cool to kind of hear you touch upon all those different places, and you had success there. I mean, schools closed, but not before championships and state championships and things like that. So now that like, and you kind of brought me to this, I guess, is you're at Newton South. It's a pretty big school. I remember playing a football game back there in like 07, 08. I mean, it was a pretty big facility from what I remember. But you've coached at a lot of smaller schools, and now you're at like a big school, and bigger schools means more kids, more talent to choose from, more levels that are consistent, whether that's varsity, sub varsity, or freshman or whatever. So talk about just going to a bigger school like this. I mean, is it all the same to you? Doesn't matter if it's bigger, more kids, or was there maybe a little bit of a shock there at first of how many guys you actually have in your program?
Yeah, so in terms of get the job, you realize, and something actually in terms of numbers, they had been down a little bit in recent years. I think just COVID has kind of hit hard, and I was talking to a coach at Medford High the other day, and he was saying that sophomore junior class numbers are really down. Like if you look at my
Makes
sophomore
sense.
junior class, there's a lot of I think I got 7 or 8 sophomores and like 5 or 6 juniors, something like that. It might be the opposite, but I know freshman class, I have 21. So you can see that. And I like that because it gives us the ability to know that for the next 4 years, we have this consistent group of, 21 freshmen that we can build around. And then from there, you add, younger levels and hopefully those numbers build back up. But yeah, in terms of getting this job and thinking about the numbers you're going to have, the facilities, the ability to have talent. I mean, in the past, at some of the smallest schools I've coached at, one of the biggest struggles is like St. Clements. We had baseball games. We were going 9, 10 guys on the bus. Like I remember one day, one of the kids had a brother, and we only had like 8 guys, and it was at the point where like, all right, can you bring your brother today just because we need him to play? And he did. I mean, we just needed that extra body, and he had played before, so it was just like I said, needing to get that extra. But here I don't have that struggle. Like I know that I don't have to send out the text who's going to be here today because it's one of those things. I have 17 on varsity and I have 14, 15 guys on freshman JVs. So just that luxury is great. I got some awesome coaches that really only one of them was with me before. The other ones were on staff or just kind of reached out and wanted to coach. But I've been really fortunate and lucky with what I have on the staff right now. But yeah, just in terms of what we have, senior heavy this year in terms of starters, 4 captains. They've been great so far. Hard workers, and they just want to win. Like that was the big thing they said to me early on. They're like, you usually you're walking into a job and the talent is kind of down a little bit. There's a reason that job was open, but this year actually the talent is really high and they've kind of built up from there. So just kind of meeting the expectations not only of myself but of the kids on that team, and just doing right by them. And that's something, like I said, from day one I've said to them, this is your team and it's my team, but I'm going to be here. I'm going to learn from you guys. You guys will learn from me. And, we're just going to make this the best senior season you guys can have.
Yeah. And it's, I know it's not easy sometimes, like taking over a program. Like when I first took over as head coach, and it was a pretty senior heavy team in itself. And, a new coach, new philosophy, a lot of question marks about what you're doing. So I understand that. And just going back to the small school thing, no, if you haven't coached at a small school or a small Catholic school, like you don't understand that struggle. Like that, what he was saying, I was just like smirking because it's so true. Like it's so true. It's different than a public high school where you're getting double, maybe triple the numbers depending on the sport, versus trying to figure out every day if you're going to have enough kids because kids are coming from all different areas. Buses have to leave at strict times. Kids might have detention. Kids might be at after school help. Kids might just have disappeared. You don't know where they went. So I get that. I get that small school struggle. So when you say that, I just smirk because I know. And
Yeah.
coaches that don't coach it, they just don't get it. So early on in the season, right? Like you mentioned, obviously coming in and taking over a program is not easy. But you have your philosophies, you have your understanding. So it's young in the season and obviously young in your tenure. Talk about the squad a little bit, what you have going on, and maybe how you're looking at your team a little bit as you see you play a first couple of games into what you are or what you might want to become.
Yeah, so we 3-0 right now. We faced Brookline first game, and that was a tough one. Like Brookline historically is very comparable to Newton South in terms of talent. So, 1-0 fourth inning, and we just kind of opened the game up, few hits, couple walks, kids executed bunts when we asked them to. But just early on in this season, we're kind of just like I said, take it game by game. We definitely got pitching. Like there's no shortage of pitching on this team. And me and my assistant coach were talking about just how fortunate we are yesterday because like you see at some of these public schools, you have 4 best arms are better than any arm you had at some of the previous schools. So it's just a luxury. And like I said, it also comes with the guys you're facing are that much better. Like I look ahead at like Lincoln Sudbury, like they just beat BC High, and that's probably, if not the top team in our league, definitely one of the top 2 or 3. And, they're probably top 10 in the state right now. So just, that's something that we, strive to play against a team like that and hopefully, hang in there early and then in the later innings, you you kind of make a couple plays, maybe you get a couple hits, but that's the big challenge because those are the programs that coaches and teams strive to be. And like I said, we certainly have the pitching, and we have, around the diamond. I got two freshmen starting, but like I said, we're very senior heavy, so it's really about, like I said, putting people in the spots that we think they're going to succeed, and just making the most of each game and trying to win trying to win, 2, 3 games a week is it's not easy managing and lining up your pitching, but I think we've done through week one, we've done a pretty good job. And then we have, two next week, two the week after. So once the league schedule starts up, it's going to be a little bit more manage this challenge. If you're playing 3 games in a week, you got to have 4 or 5, even 6 guys ready to go. But I do think we have that luxury this year.
Yeah. So, I mean, what are the scores of the games been that you guys have played so far?
Yeah, so the 7-1 against Brookline, but the game felt a lot closer than that. And then Brighton, 11-0 and 10-0. They're a young team. They definitely graduated a lot. I think they had a couple transfers too, but just in terms of a couple games start out the year, and it was a good confidence thing for our team to win a couple games. And going forward, the games are going to get tougher. They know that. So, like I said, it's a good start. But at the end of the day, I just look at it as you just got to win the next one and, get to 10. I mean, that's obviously a goal, 10 wins. But from
Yeah.
what I'm seeing, I like to think we're going to get a little more than 10 wins. So,
Now, the reason I ask you, and I mean, and it kind of didn't necessarily answer my thought, but you score a lot of runs and you don't let up a lot of runs. So, would you say your team's that balanced, or would you say you're definitely more defensive or pitching, or are you more offensive in producing runs?
so me as a coach, I'm defense first. We practice it a lot, and I really want to focus on limiting runs and staying in the game like that. We can definitely hit like top of our lineup. We get some really good bats, and people that know me or have coached against me know that I'm willing to steal, bunt, things like that. Just take chances that maybe, maybe in some situations I would, but other situations I wouldn't. But I think in terms of balance, I think we're pretty balanced. We got a couple really good pitchers right now, and then we have a couple guys at the top of the lineup that can really do anything. And it's like I said, it's just a real good start, and hopefully the success continues into the next couple of weeks.
Now with the playoff system, I mean, you guys are in a pretty good league. So you getting some wins early on and then you're going to jump into league play. I mean, how do you feel as far as the playoff system goes? It's, I know it's more points and I've heard from fall coaches and winter sport coaches, but as a spring coach looking at that, I mean, how do you think you fare as far as if it got down to the wire of having 10 or 11 wins, you get in, but your seating could be, depending on your strength of schedule, either really low or maybe middle ground.
Yeah, so in terms of that, I'll be honest, I'm more focused on the 10 wins. I think that having a good seed is a good thing, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have to beat the best anyways. So I mean, if I'm looking at it as we could be the 20 seed or we could be the 30 seed, like in my own opinion, that doesn't make much of a difference because you're still gonna win 4 or 5 games to get to that, D1 North finals. And yeah, I mean, you just take it game by game from there. You hope your pitching lines up. You hope your team got hot at the right time. But like I said, I'm more of the mindset that I would rather get the 10 wins than go. And I remember seeing in basketball there were a couple teams that were like 7-13, 8-12, and they got in as like the 20 seed, and they're practically hosting a game or they're hosting a playing game. And like I said, from my mindset, I'm okay with that being like 11-9, 10-10, and maybe having to play a playing game because even though our league is good, Division 1 in terms of the Catholic Conference, you get some really good teams there. You got the Merrimack Valley, so even the Middlesex League is probably comparable to us. So you're looking at it across the board, and it's really just a year-to-year thing. Like I was talking to a
Yeah.
coach from basketball, the Merrimack Valley, and usually Merrimack Valley in basketball is one of the top 2 or 3. And this year they were just really down, so it kind of affected the seeding of teams in that conference.
Yeah, I always wonder that. I mean, I'm not familiar with spring sports as far as how, strength and matchup and leagues and things like that typically go. But I always find it interesting, especially with this playoff system, to hear the different perspectives. And like you said, in a new program getting into the playoffs, was the team in the playoffs the year before?
No.
So there you
I
go.
mean,
So there's a
so
huge
I
goal.
shouldn't say they were, but it was last year where do you remember everyone qualified?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it was one of those, like, if they didn't do that, they wouldn't have been in, but, because they did that, they got in.
Yeah, so you obviously that's a huge goal to get in there, and like you said, who knows? You end up matching up against a monster, and worst case or obviously winning's the best case, but even if you lost that game and it was a close game, and that team ends up making a run and going the semis or going the finals, like you matched up with that team, and that's even though it might be a loss in a way, it's kind of a big victory for your program in year one. So I agree, like play whoever, whenever. I mean, eventually you're gonna have to play them anyway, so you might as well when you're ready to go. So you mentioned your commute, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, I would struggle with that. That's a long commute there. But let's talk about you as a coach in general, being a head coach, and you've been a head coach at previous different things, or assistant coach that's had a lot to offer to the program as far as getting the head coach's ear. What would you say at this point is a huge strength of yours as a coach, or maybe something as a head coach that you want to work on to get better at as well?
Yeah, so in terms of strength and, my number one strength would be, managing, um, pitching and, aspects of the game. So calling steals, calling bunts, having people in spots that I think they're gonna do their best. So and another strength, this is one that I've found is a huge asset to me, communication. The parents wanna know where the games are, what time they are, and that's something that, I'm quick with the email. Like the other day, I had to just, let everyone know of a change to the field situation, things like that. So parents want to know right away. They want to know where we're going to be. Are they going to be inside? Are you going to have to pick up your kids at the practice field? Or are you going to have to pick them up at the high school? So, just being communicative and making sure that all that information is given to them as you receive it is huge. But like I said, just in-game management, that's always been, as a coach, my strength.
And
And
that communication is not easy. Like,
yeah.
just for people aware of that, like on top of having a practice and obviously having a script of what you want to practice and do at practice and driving and commuting in your regular job, you got to also be on your toes with getting emails or field changes or cancellations. Yeah, and getting that information out there quick, that was hard. That was like a really hard thing for me to be able to do. I felt like my days, like my lunch period or my prep period in school, I'm like, oh, I got to send this email. I got to confirm this time with a coach, or to make sure that the bus is coming. Like, it's just nonstop. So you say that like very casually as a strength, but that's not easy. Like, that's not easy, Paul, at all.
Yeah, yeah, and then it's one of those things that I've actually, and I appreciated this. A few of the parents have emailed me and said, "We just want to thank you for, good and quick communication." So that's something that just going forward, I'm going to maintain. And then in terms of, you mentioned what's something you want to work on as a coach, and this is always something that I've talked to plenty of baseball coaches that say it. Indoor practice structure. It's so challenging sometimes because you're doing things in a limited space, and some days you're going to have 2 3 levels all in that space, and it's limited. Like, what are we focusing on? What are we doing? We're fortunate that we have a smaller gym along with the bigger gym, so depending on the time that we go at, I potentially have 2 spaces to work with. But it's definitely something that, like I said, I do want to work on coming up with more, drills and things to do during those hours, and just making the most of the time we have and getting the most out of it, basically. Because like I said, I've seen it done in facilities that, if you have, like when I was at St. Joe's, we would rent out extra innings in Watertown, and that's a big space. Like you get a lot of cages and there's a lot of things you can do, but like I said, space is still limited, and I'm a big fan of not having people stand around waiting to do things. And when you're indoors, there's kind of a lot of standing around waiting to do things because there's only so many spaces that can be used.
Yeah. And like, it's funny, and I'm sure every coach will say the same exact thing, like being able to, I mean, hockey doesn't necessarily face this problem, or basketball, or any indoor sport for that matter, I guess. But like I know in football, when we were at Arlington Catholic, before they did that field over, I mean, that field, it rained one day, it was a swamp for a week. And
Yeah.
when you have multiple teams sharing one field, and sometimes it's pouring out, and you just can't go on the field because it's just in terrible shape. You're in a gym trying to do walkthrough and skills and drills, and so it's not easy. So when you say that for baseball, I'm sure any coach that has a sport that's just a change due to weather, it's probably something they all want to work on. So you're definitely not alone in that area. The biggest thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm just kind of excited about, is because I don't know a lot about it, and I'm always eager to learn these different things about coaches and how they kind of organize this, is practice. I come from the football world that, a lot of our practice is scripted, as you've coached football. So you're pulling from a lot of different practice schedules as far as, how much time you have, what you need to work on, the efficiency and the rate that you need to do it. So how does baseball practice look? Are you working those scenarios like you mentioned about, shifting guys, or putting guys in certain spots, or practicing bunting situations? I mean, how much of baseball practice is practicing scenario baseball?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, now where I'm at, it's a lot less than it would have been at some of the smaller schools because these kids have built that awareness on their own over the last, 5, 10, 15 years. A lot, I mean, like my infield, I actually switched one kid into right field from second base. And it was funny. I thought it was going to be a tough conversation. Like, oh, senior captain, like he's probably better served in right than he is in second. And he actually came up to me at the first scrimmage and was like, Coach, I think I'm better off in the outfield. He's a great second baseman. I laughed. I go, you know something? I go, I was thinking it. I said, I was kind of thinking of the way to approach you about it, but I said, the fact that you saw it makes my life a lot easier. So, but the other spots, so like second, like I said, second has shifted, but first, short, third, we're talking players that have played together for at the high school level 4 years now, but at the younger levels, they've been on the same teams for a while. So that natural chemistry and understanding of what each other is already doing. And the big thing is like bunt situations. Do you want them crashing? Do you want them sitting? In terms of first and third, how do you want to play it? And then, just different other philosophies of shifts. The big struggle with shifts in high school is like I scout a game and I see a kid throwing 70 and then I throw a kid throwing 83. It really changes the way a kid's hitting. And, maybe they're ahead of the guy throwing 70, but behind the guy throwing 83. So everything that you've done for scouting is kind of out the window because you're seeing them hit off a different pitcher.
How do you how do you scout? Like in baseball, I mean, do you guys receive film? I mean, how does that kind of work? Or are you just getting a scouting report? I mean, baseball, I always wonder that. Like spring sports, I always wonder that, because for the most part, your games are probably the same days. And so it's not like you can
Right.
just send
Mhm.
somebody out to go watch them, unless you have somebody, and maybe some bigger programs have that in their booster fund, that they they have like a scout or something. But I mean, how do you know, like, opponent to opponent, who you're seeing, whether it's a righty or a lefty? I mean, how does that all work?
So, I mean, team to team, it's a little different. Like, I mean, I did scout a game yesterday. Probably Eddie played for you, right? McDonald.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
went
yeah.
and scouted him up in Hull yesterday. You're just looking at different things. So like, like I said, I was able to go up there. We didn't practice it until 12. His game was at 10, so we went up there. And you're looking at different things, but at the end of the day, it's like those opportunities are limited because I'm lucky they played at 10 o'clock on a Saturday. And like tomorrow, we don't play, but we have practice. So I said to one of my coaches, do you mind going to see this game? The other one, do you mind going to see this game? And then I'll kind of run practice. But that's important to me, having the ability to see that team. And I have no problem running a practice because these kids are good about, throwing the cage. So one of the other kids will throw to the other guy in the cage and things like that. So I'm fortunate where the kids have that level of independence and structure that if I'm running something on the infield and I bring everything together, they can be trusted to go hit in the cage, which is important because, like I said, you do have to go look at these teams. And we play, like I said, St. Joe's Tuesday and then Cambridge on Wednesday. And I actually know a lot of the Cambridge guys just from coaching football there. So I already know, I haven't seen them yet, but I know a lot of their strengths. And who's going to be playing where. So as much as I do want to get a look at them, it may not be necessarily as important as seeing someone like Newton North, who I really don't know anything about.
Yeah, seeing teams more in league at this point because you haven't really played teams up in this area maybe ever, you
Right.
know. So yeah, getting to know them a little bit more. So it's interesting. Like I find that so intriguing because that's not easy. I mean, at least a football, like you know that they're playing either this day or this day, and maybe for baseball that just varies week to week of when teams are playing, and then when games get canceled, so their schedules got to get updated, right? So like if you have an opponent who you think's playing on a Tuesday and they get rained out, and you
Mm.
weren't aware of that, then like yeah, you might lose a scout just from not knowing that. So yeah, I you know take the hat off to you guys. That's a lot hotter in the spring than it definitely is in the fall. So you've coached at a lot of different places and you've coached a lot of different sports, and we talked about this at kind of the top a little bit. Um, do you feel like you're a different coach in every sport, or do you feel like philosophy wise you're the same, but you obviously each sport's different, so you have to be different in a sense? But as far as your core values, do you feel like you're pretty much the same across the board?
Yeah, so in terms of what I, as a coach do, philosophically, I'm not loud, I'm not a yeller. If a kid's not running out a pop up in the infield, I'm probably gonna yell at him, run, things like that. But I don't just yell to yell, and that's how I am across the board. So on a football field, I'm probably one of the quieter guys on the sideline. But Danny will tell you the opposite if you talk to him about it, because I'll always tell him, and that's the thing, you want people that will share your opinions, but also challenge your opinions too. So I'm always the guy that's going to challenge the opinions of the head coach as an assistant. And as a head coach, I want people to challenge me and, kind of give me some of their own feedback. Like, okay, you want to steal in this situation. I think you shouldn't because the catcher has a good arm. So philosophically, I love listening to other people as a head coach. I think it's important. And I think it's important to, of course, treat your assistant coaches with respect, but make sure that, they feel independent. So I've seen coaches come down and, sub varsity, I want it done this way, and this way. And me, absolutely not. I want to give those coaches the independence and understanding that I'm okay with whatever they do. I have full confidence in their abilities and decision making. And that, like I said, whether they win or lose at the end of the day, we're not judging the JV and freshman level. Nobody's going to remember their record, but people are going to remember the record at the varsity level. So philosophically, like I said, we're focused on winning at the varsity level, but we're focused on development at the sub varsity levels. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, and you luckily you have that, right? You at least have that consistency of knowing that you have that in a bigger program, which is really nice. So that's great. I mean, taking a look at all of that and like everything that you've put together, and you're off to great success of 3-0 thus far. Just baseball wise, just a personal question that I kind of sort of have, and and you alluded to it here as a head coach. I respected my assistants a lot because I was an assistant for such a long time and grinding. And I know that it took a while for me to get that respect to the point that, I mean, I would say probably in 2009, Serge just let me coach and that was it. Like, I mean, he obviously would challenge on things and suggest things, and he's the boss. So whenever he said goes, but I felt like such a different person when I knew that I didn't have somebody kind of breathing down my neck all the time as a head coach doing that to an assistant. So I was very aware of that when I was a head coach, and knowing that how hard I worked and wanted my voice to be heard and wanted to be taken serious. So I respect the fact that you do that as a head coach, and do that for your coaches, because again, they're putting the work in too, and they might have bigger, ambitions to become a head coach down the line somewhere else, and obviously want to be a sponge and take in as much as they possibly can. Um, do you think you would say, like, let's say, you've been in the playoffs in baseball and other sports, but let's just kind of stick to baseball here. Would you say you're the same coach in a regular season of baseball versus like a playoff? Or do you feel like you coach the game differently because it is a one and done intensive purposes game? So there is no tomorrow if you don't win.
Yeah, so I treat every game the same. I feel like I'm looking at every game saying at the varsity level, I'm looking to win this. We will make the decisions that put us in the best position in a regular season game to win. but sometimes you are mindful of the fact that there is a tomorrow. So, if I have a kid that's and the pitch count is 115, I think that's high as it is. I think 100 might be pretty good, but 115 pitches, is a lot. So in a regular season game, I'm probably not going to stretch a guy past 100 in the playoffs. Maybe you do. I mean, it's just going to depend on, and you got to see how they're feeling too. So if a kid's feeling great and it's a regular season game, I'll probably let him go to 100. But in the playoffs, maybe you let him go to 110, finish out that last inning. It really depends on, like I said, how they're feeling and your confidence level and knowing their knowing their capabilities. Because I had a kid the other day, and he ended up pitching 2 or 3 innings, and I kind of said it to him like, "Yeah, I don't know if you're a 7 inning guy yet." And he kind of laughed. He's like, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, have you built up the stamina to pitch 7 innings?" And then in the fourth inning, he's like, "Coach, I think I need someone to come in for me." I said, and that's the thing. I said, that's fine. Just make sure you communicate that to me. And, going forward, we build you up next time. Maybe you go 5 innings, but it's like I said, you got to talk to your pitches. You got to understand how they're feeling. And then, like I said, as the season goes on, as the game get bigger, maybe you stretch them out a little bit. And then in terms of defense and decision making, I don't see much different in a regular season versus playoff game. But like I said, pitching wise is really the only way I see a difference.
Yeah, and I always wonder that because again, like you might throw a kid a little bit longer. So let me ask you this: you mentioned a pitcher 115 pitches. That's high. So how many pitches? Because I always find this funny with baseball. How many pitches do you think a pitcher's thrown before a game actually starts to warm up?
Yeah, that's a good question. My preference is, they warm up, get loose, throw a little bit of long toss. And then in the cage, I would say 15 to 25. Some kids maybe need a little more than that, but I think that's probably a pretty good number to strive for.
So if a
And
kid who throws 115 pitches, let's say they throw 25 warm-up pitches, that's I mean, now you're flirting 140, 145
right,
kind of in that area. I always find that funny about baseball because yeah, like pitchers are obviously warming up, they're getting their arm loose, so they're throwing a lot more before their pitch count actually starts officially in a game.
right.
So I always find that really an interesting point about baseball.
And I think the pitch count's necessary too. Like, I think it's a good thing. And I know growing up, I remember a game when I was like 16, 17. I know my father wasn't there because I wouldn't have thrown this amount if he was. But I know I threw like 140, 150 pitches. And I kept selling it to my coach. I'm like, put me back out there. Let me keep going. And my big thing was, I'm not going to play in college. I'm not, a superstar. So my big thing was, let me keep going because this is kind of where I'm at. I'm not looking to play at the next level. So obviously you want to protect your arm and know how you're feeling. But I was one of those players. Once I got loose, I could throw 150 pitches. Not to say it's a good thing, and I would never ask one of my guys to do it. But like I said, I was self-aware. I knew where I was at, and I knew my future wasn't in playing baseball after the high school level. So just like I said, I was a competitor, and I always wanted to put my team in the best position to win as a player and as a coach now.
Yeah, I mean, it's smart when you think about it. If you already know kind of what you're going to be, right? I'm not saying you wouldn't do damage to your arm, but it's a lot less minimal when you know that this is kind of the last time that I'm going to be really throwing a ball like this ever, So, no, I totally get that. And one really cool thing that I just want to bring up, and you brought up his name a couple of times, is Danny Kelly, and you guys are lifelong friends and have coached together. And I was lucky to when I coached football at Allentown Catholic to kind of have my lifelong friend. We coached, won a Super Bowl together, coached linebackers. I was a defensive coordinator. We coached together for like 7 seasons. You and Danny have obviously coached together just as long, if not more. I mean, talk about working with someone who's like a really good friend outside of what you do, and obviously both being so passionate about what you do together.
Yeah. So in terms of me and Danny knew each other growing up, and it's kind of funny when my mother was looking through some old pictures from like when I was 4 or 5 years old. She actually found a soccer picture of me and Danny, and we didn't really even know each other that well, but it was funny to see. My mother's like, look at this picture from 1999 or 2000. So we always knew each other growing up. He was a year ahead of me in school, so we were friends, but more so after high school, we became a lot closer. And he actually had asked me to coach Babe Ruth with him back in 2014. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that time. It was like, do I want to coach in Medford? Do I not? Do I want to teach in Medford? Like, I really didn't know at that time. And like I said, I kind of got into the Babe Ruth aspect of it. Loved that. We had some really good runs with that team. And the thing is, me and him think alike, but we also think differently. So he's not afraid to challenge me. I'm not afraid to challenge him when it comes to, a decision on the field. When coaching football, um, my thing is he knows way more about the plays than I do, but he knows that I know more about timeouts and different little things like that. That, as he says, maybe the head coach is thinking of, but gets wrapped up in the game sometimes, and maybe isn't thinking of it as much as they should be. But he knows that if I think that we should use a timeout, go on two, or maybe run the ball. I'm a run first coach. Like, as a football coach, I remember we had some games at Mystic Valley where we maybe threw the ball 2, 3 times just because that wasn't our strength. So you play to your strengths. But like I said, he knows how to make the most out of me as an assistant coach when it came to football. And then in terms of baseball, me and him kind of bounce each other's ideas off one another. He hated bunting back in 2014, and I think after 2, 3 years of coaching with me, he's like, "Wow, I can't believe we didn't bunt nearly as much as we do now because it's so effective." And teams got to make a play. Like, if you can't field a bunt, teams are going to exploit that and make the most of it. So just,
Yeah.
and it's like in basketball, my philosophy's always been press, because you put the pressure on the defense, you make them beat you. If you're putting the ball in play as a baseball team, you're making the other team beat you. And then in football, if you're running the ball and they can't stop it, why throw the ball?
Yeah, and it's nice, and what I really enjoyed about like coaching with Dave Rich, Danny Kelly, he was the head coach at Mystic Valley, he's at MC coaching football now, but someone who's coached a lot of different sports. Former guest of this show, assistant coaches month last year, not this past one, but the year before. But I coached with Dave was like, we worked a summer camp together too. We both taught and we both teach in Medford. We still do. And we ran a summer camp together and then we went right into football. So from August, I mean, really June to Thanksgiving, we were with each other pretty much every day. And then mostly on Sundays chatting about, especially, the work week coming up or what we had to organize. And then with football, obviously film and scouting and all that. So I think it's always cool when you have someone outside of your world of coaching, because not many people get it or understand it or know the grind that goes into it and the passion that goes into it. So when you have somebody who's like also in like your circle, like your close circle of friends outside of what you do, it is nice to have that person who just like gets it and understands it and knows the highs and lows that sometimes come with the job and come with the responsibility. So no, that's nice to have. It really is. How in jumping into that, I mean, you've coached in all these different schools, and I mean, these sports are 3 different seasons, so you're basically year round, and then I'm sure in the summer you're doing something involved in one of those sports or multiple of those sports or getting ready for football, however you balance it. How do you balance that life kind of with family, friends, being social? Because at the end of the day, like, you do want to live life too, like, and you don't want to be completely consumed, because coaching is not something that's paying your mortgage or paying all the bills. It's, you work hard and you do a lot and you get a good chunk for it, but not for the hours you put into it before and after as well. So I mean, how do you balance it all for yourself?
Yeah, so in terms of balance, my big thing is I try to, stay social. We've a men's softball team we do in Medford, in the summer. And then, just my parents live in Medford. I work at the high school, so I'll kind of stop in there, see my parents and my brother some days after work. It's a little more challenging now with baseball to do something like that. But I mean, I'm only 26. I don't have a wife and kids, so it's a little easier for me to balance that, because this is what I want to be doing. This is something that I've worked towards for all these years, and it's gotten to a point where it's just second nature to me. Like, I expect to be doing something after school, and that was what, when COVID started, it really hit me like, wow, I go from 6 days a week doing something to nothing. Like that's what it came down to. So I started to think about more some of the other things I'm doing. But like I said, at the end of the day, it wasn't like when COVID gave us a break, I was like, oh my God, this is such a nice break. Like, no, I was like, this is awful. I can't wait to be back out doing something because when baseball started that summer, it was like the first week of July, and we coached in the Tompkins Baseball League, and the commissioner was adamant about having it. And it was a great season. Like, we had some of the best talent that we've ever seen in the league because people were tired of not being able to go out and do stuff. So um, that was one of those things that was great. And like I said, that's my social life. Like that's what I love to be doing. I like to coach a baseball, football, basketball game. And that's what like I said, that's what I consider myself.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, and I don't know why there's like this echo every time, but at least I hear it on my end. So yeah, and that's what I really like. That's what I love about you most. I mean, we obviously teach in the same city, and we run into each other quite a few times, whether it's in school things or out of school things. And I always love chat with you because I feel like you're 26 years old, but you're like an old soul, and that you really understand games and sports and student athletes. And part of that is being an educator and understanding the whole kid, not just the one that you see on the practice field, but understanding that there's a million other things going on in their life, which is interesting. And you mentioned, which I feel, and I still kind of feel this way, and I'm 38, is like I always want something to do after school. Like I want something like now to continue teaching, because that's what coaching really is. Coaching is teaching. And, I mean, we're going through what we go through with, contracts and all that stuff now. But in all seriousness, like teaching's one of those things that there's no overtime for the job, right? So like after school, when you're working in your classroom for an hour and a plus, and I'm not saying everyone does that, but a lot of people do, or they're in their early morning working on their classroom. Like you're not earning overtime, you're not getting paid extra to do that. So a lot of times people understand that when they go into teaching, that they do have a free schedule, they do get a little bit early, they do have vacations, they do have their summers off. So they're able to hustle, those that want to hustle. And obviously coaching, if the schedules line up, I mean, it lines up with school, and practices are after school and it's not during the day. So for most part, you see a lot of educators that are in the coaching field that are doing that because they're passionate about teaching and what they do and so on and so forth. So, that's a big reason why I had you on here. And I understand that about you, that for you, it's more not just, hey, I coach this sport. It's, hey, I coach this sport because I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about working with youth. I'm passionate about working with high school kids. And yeah, you get to know so many different people. I love going to a game and seeing a ref or seeing a coach or seeing somebody in the stands who was involved in a program that I was involved in way back when. It is always nice. It is a good world to be around. And that's why I started this podcast, because there just are so many great stories and coaches out there that really grind and hustle and do, sometimes what they don't think is crazy things, but are like traveling and going place to place and handling all the responsibilities that come with the job. Last thing I'll ask you before we jump into our 2-minute drill is like, what's your advice to young coaches? I mean, you're young. I mean, you're 26. So, and you've done a lot. I mean, you've done a lot. What would be your advice to some young kids that are maybe in college that might be just coaching that little league level, or, out of college and really looking to land the coaching gig at some program?
Yeah, so my biggest piece of advice would be um, don't be afraid to move around. Sometimes some people are dedicated to one city, and I love Medford, but I also have no problem going somewhere that I think is a better opportunity. I could have, I could have waited 10, 20 years to be the, Medford High coach, or you can make decisions like I did where, you coach at some smaller schools, you build that experience, you run things on your own. And then, like I said, Newton South presents itself. It was a great opportunity, somewhere I want to be for a long time. And that's like, there's people that want to coach at the college level. There's people that want to coach where they grew up. And in my case, I just wanted a program that was like Newton South, where I can grow, build this and develop it. And like I said, be here for a long time. And then with Cambridge football, I love being involved. And me and Roy talked a couple weeks ago, and kind of like he knows, like he said it to me, he goes, baseball is your priority, obviously, but we'd love to have you. And that was all I wanted to hear. Like, you wanted. I want to be a part of that program. And I also like I want to run my own program. And that's the thing. The fact that he understands that was important to me. And another big piece of advice I would say is make sure that as a head coach or just a coach, that people like you, because you list 3 references, maybe 5 references, but it's the ones you don't list that are the ones that are getting called. So like one of my references that I didn't list, but I got along with was an athletic director who, when I was being considered for the Newton South job, in my head, I was like, he probably got called. And I just kind of sent him an email and said, I really have a shot at this, I think. She's called a couple references. And he said, oh, no, we've already talked. So it's one of those things you realize how small the circle is, how tight athletic directors really are. And if you don't make a good representation of yourself at one school, just know that it's probably going to be known many other places. So, just be consistent, be a good person, get along with athletic admins, school admins, and, parents talk too. So be someone that players not only like playing for, but parents like their kids playing for.
Yeah, and there's a lot of questions that I ask that are similar from podcast to podcast, and this is one that I always ask most often because there is such great advice. And listening to you talk about that, like it is a small circle. People do talk to each other. You might list, where you've coached in your resume, and then someone who's looking at that goes, "Oh, I know this person who was that program at this time," or "I know somebody who's connected and affiliated with this school. I'm going to reach out to them too." Like you said, there are like ways that they look at your references, but they're also going to have references based off of who they know and who might have been in that program or around that program at a certain time. So yeah, it's always leave yourself on a good note, never leave on a bad note, even if you feel like you want to be somewhere else and you're unhappy. The head coach isn't necessarily trying to make you unhappy or make you feel unhappy. So, sometimes just being mature and understanding that whether something's for you or not for you, and, conducting yourself like, like a person that you would want people to know you or recognize you as is really important. So I think that was a great answer. Truthfully, I really liked it a lot. Okay, we're going to jump into our last segment here, which is our Cheney's 2-minute drill. And this is how it's going to work. I'm just going to fire some rapid fire questions at you, 1 or 2 word answers. If you want to explain a little bit more, you can. We're super lenient. But I do get a challenge flag. If I want you to explain something a little bit more, or want me to jump in, if I want to jump in and ask more, want more explained, you got to let me know. But other than that, it's the coaches love it. It's their favorite segment of the show. And here we go. So, song that still gets you juiced up before a big game or a big matchup.
Dream On, Aerosmith.
Okay. Never get the same answer. I've never gotten the same answer on this. In baseball, you telling your guys to take the first pitch, or are you swinging away at it?
Swinging away at it, depending on the team and the part of the lineup, but swing away.
Okay. Would you rather have 2 pitchers that are very dominant, or a 3-4 batter that are very, very consistent at hitting the ball?
Pitchers. You can never have enough pitching.
If you have 2 pitchers in baseball like that are very good, is that like you're a tough team to beat right out the gate?
Yeah.
Just
I mean,
because
you see the Tampa Bay Rays with what they've had over the years, and they certainly don't have the Yankees and Red Sox lineups. But you put a Blake Snell out there, and you get that in a playoff series, like that's tough to beat.
Yeah. It's interesting. I always wondered that. And I'm sure it's the same thing in softball. If you have a girl who can throw gas, you're a good team. Most important defensive position in baseball?
Catcher.
Okay. What would be more important outside of catcher, shortstop or center field?
I actually say first base. People laugh when I say that, but if you get a great shortstop and you don't have a first baseman that can catch the ball, at the end of the day, you're going to struggle.
Good point. See, this is why I asked these questions. That's interesting. I would have said maybe like 4th or 5th first base. I would have looked at shortstop being like, it's kind of like your most athletic guy in the infield, and center field is probably your most athletic guy who can track a ball and run and has some speed. But yeah, I didn't even think of that. First base.
I will say you can have an average first baseman and be okay. You can't have a weak first baseman and be okay.
Okay. I like that. I know you've coached at a lot of different places, and I'm going to ask you, just if you can throw one, name a coach who's had like a pretty big influence on you as far as maybe helped you develop into, you have a lot of the same philosophies as them.
I mean, Danny Kelly's obviously one. And then John Prezio's is another great one. He was Bishop Fenwick, and me and him still talk a lot over the years. He'd be a really good one to get on your podcast too. If you think I've coached a lot of places.
Yeah. Hey, listen, give me the contact and I most certainly will reach out. Football, basketball, or baseball, rank them as your top sports to coach as far as like what you feel like you're one at, two at, or three at.
One's baseball. And then two, three. I mean, I would say two's probably basketball, three's football. But when it comes to football, like I said, I have skills, but I also have areas that I know I could improve on. So I think that's why I would say probably two for basketball.
Okay. Okay. One word to describe your coaching style.
Strategic.
Very good word. That's actually might be the best answer I've heard in the year and a half of doing this, truthfully. And last, the Red Sox will finish blank in the AL East this year.
Third.
Okay.
I
I've
mean,
heard a
they're
lot
not
of
off
people
to
say
a great
fourth.
start, but I don't know. I mean, I have a feeling they're going to get on a run at some point, but I still don't think they have the bullpen to really get over the edge, and the starting rotation too,
Yeah. Okay.
especially with Sale out.
Right, right. If we ever get Seal back to 100%. Okay, man. So you've survived the 2-minute drill, and I just want to thank you for coming on here today. It was really cool just to pick your mind and listen to how you think. And someone who came from a small school to hear someone going to teach at a big school or coach at a big school, I should say, and just hearing the difference in some areas made me laugh a little bit and made me think of my days at all these small schools as well. So I appreciate you coming on here, and congrats with 3-0 start so far. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more success ahead. We'll be keeping an eye on you, and I'm sure we'll be chatting outside of this, as the season goes on as well.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for having me, Anthony. This is great. I remember watching the first couple you did. Serge being someone that I've looked up to over the years as well. And I ran into Serge a couple months ago, and we talked for a while. And just like I said, he's another guy that's someone that, like, I know you've seen him as maybe your biggest mentor, if not one of your biggest mentors.
Yeah.
Like I said, you've had some other guests on here, like Coach Ingram, another mentor of mine. He was my freshman baseball coach, and
Oh, really?
yeah, oh, he was awesome. We loved playing for him. And then Jimmy Rabbit, he was my freshman football coach. So a couple other people that you've had on here that I've known for 10, 15 years.
Yeah, it's so funny. And you mentioned Eddie McDonald, someone who I love coaching, like one of my all-time favorites. And so it's really funny that when I've done this podcast, how much people are connected with each other. And you mentioned like Dennis Ingram, like I had on Jay Keane, Mark Antonelli, Dennis Ingram, and these guys like all came from like the same coaching circle, all going back to like Somerville, and how these guys have all gone to different areas. But and even Chris Harvey at Salem State, like
Yeah,
all these
he's the one
guys
that
know
my
each other.
Prez coached
Uh,
with him for years, and that's
yeah.
another. He's not Summerall, but I know Harvey is. So
Yeah, and it is really cool to see how these worlds are connected and how people are connected from program to program. So it's just funny when you mention names like Danny, and then to hear that you played for some of these guys that were on this podcast. It's funny. I mean, Jimmy's a very close friend of mine, so it is just funny how that circles back. But like I said, we appreciate having you on here, and I know it's only on the way up for you. So I'm really excited to follow you as you continue your coaching career. So Anthony Petrellis, Paul Williams, Newton South Baseball. Till next time.